We don't want to overreact to a small sample size in a preseason game, but Caleb Williams matched all the hype in his Chicago Bears debut against the Buffalo Bills.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. On the show today, we break down the Bears-Bills preseason game, obviously focusing on the first passes we've seen Caleb Williams throw in a Chicago Bears uniform. A lot to love from what we saw, and albeit a small sample size, but pretty close to mistake-free football from Caleb, and really looking like someone who doesn't play like a rookie quarterback in his first preseason game. We'll also then take a look at some of the players around him, including the offensive line, impressing in pass protection for sure, maybe the running game a little less so, and some other notes on players moving up and down the depth chart, guys making some plays and also making some mistakes that will go a long ways towards determining who makes this 53-man roster. But everyone was tuned in to Bears-Bills to watch Caleb Williams. As expected, Bears gave him plenty of handoffs and kind of ran a full offense. This is not just a Caleb Williams show. They want to see the running game and the other starters do stuff, but they gave him the full complement of starting players, including veterans like Keenan Allen out there. Everyone who was healthy was out there, including your big three receivers, your top few tight ends, your backfield for the most part. Like, it was the full Bears offensive experience, and they moved the ball down the field well. Obviously, neither one of Caleb Williams' drives ended with touchdowns, but those drives both had a lot of running plays towards the end when they got into the red zone. Caleb really only had one shot at the end zone at the very end there, where he kind of just threw it away over the head of Rome Odunze. But for the most part, I don't think the lack of touchdowns had anything to do with Caleb Williams, because he looked the part. No one's going to check the box score and say, 4 of 7 passing, no touchdowns, okay, like ho-hum, whatever. But you got to remember, 2 of those were dropped passes. Cole Kmet drops one on the far sideline, I guess the near sideline there, the right sideline, and then DJ Moore also had one kind of low going to the ground, but definitely a catchable pass that you would expect a $27 million a year wide receiver to make. So those 2 incompletions were perfectly fine throws from Caleb Williams. Plus you had 2 passes that were really intentionally thrown away. There was one that was called back for holding, so it doesn't count as one of the incompletions, and then the one over Rome Odunze. So there was not a pass from Caleb that was just like a bad throw. Out of the 3 incompletions, it was 2 drops and someone, a kind of a throwaway ball, a safe throwaway in the back of the end zone when no one else was open. And that's what stands out right away for me with Caleb, was just how smart he was with taking care of the football. You watched through the first time live on Saturday, and there was one throw in particular where he tried to kind of force it into Rome Odunze on an out route towards the right sideline, and it looked like maybe it could have even been picked off. I mean, I don't know if you heard the Bills or the Bears announcers, depending on if you're streaming the game or watching on your local television, but that was kind of a lot of criticism there of what is he doing with that pass? And even when you're watching, you're kind of, what is he thinking there? Clearly, Rome Odunze was well covered, but then the flag goes for illegal contact. And when you watch the all 22 of that play in particular, you can see the anticipation Caleb is throwing there. It's an out route to Rome Odunze. I don't remember the exact depth, 8, 10, 12 yards or whatever. And Caleb is loading up to throw that pass as Odunze is going from the vertical part of his route to the breaking to the sideline part of his route. He's already stepping in and winding up to throw that ball before the receiver is out of his break. Before the receiver is open, he's trying to throw it, anticipating that the receiver will be open by throwing it to a spot. It's that exact moment that the defensive back grabs onto Rome Odunze, commits an illegal contact penalty, and then is able to stay on top of the route and get a hand on it and break it up. And it makes it look like, oh, well, wait a minute, why was Caleb throwing that ball? But like, he threw that ball trusting that Rome Odunze was going to get open from all the work that they've put in together. And you love to see that kind of trust and that kind of anticipation from a rookie quarterback in his first ever game. Like, those anticipation throws are things that we've seen Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky struggle with in the past and never really quite speeded up enough. And that's not to say that, Caleb Williams was perfect on all of his, reads and anticipation. Like, there was a play, the first pass attempt, the one that he threw away and was called back for the holding on Darnell Wright. Like, that was a play where it was kind of a quick 3-step drop, looks to his right, and you could see, if you go look at the wide range of the play, he's got, I believe it was Keenan Allen in the slot, running the same kind of out route he threw to Rome Odunze, DJ Moore going vertical. It's a high-low read that either, your first read is DJ Moore going vertical or Keenan Allen breaking to the out. So it's like 3-step drop, looks to the right. Feels like Allen's a little bit too covered, but maybe if he had gotten from high to low a little bit quicker, if the ball comes up perfect timing, maybe you could hit him. But okay, moves back to the middle of the field where he's got Gerald Everett at tight end running a post route up the middle, and then you've got Rome Odunze coming from the backside on a drag route. And again, it's just a vertical high-low read. Do you throw it over the linebackers or in front of the linebackers? And even there, like, Odunze kind of stops in between the zones, and Caleb looks to pull, but then he's like a half second late, so he can't fire it in because the coverage is converging. And that's when he scrambles out of the pocket. There's the holding penalty, and he just kind of throws it away. And it's like, those are the little areas where if you want to nitpick Caleb Williams's performance, right? Okay, could he have been a little bit more decisive to pull the trigger on those throws? And there's a couple too where maybe the ball arrives a half a second late, but like, he's got the velocity to be able to get the ball where it needs to be, even if as a rookie in his first time running the offense, maybe it's not at 100% lightning speed getting through the plays. And then you get like that rollout to the right where he flicks it to Cole Kmet like 25, 30 yards in the air for a beautiful throw while on the run, full sprint towards the sideline. Like, obviously doing things with immense physical tools that we just don't see Bears quarterbacks do historically and across the board. Smart decision after smart decision with the football. Great pocket presence as well to feel out his offensive line, hang in there as long as he can, and then get out when he absolutely needs to. But, we've seen previous Bears quarterbacks, Fields and Trubisky, like, leave the pocket early or stay in the pocket too long and take a sack. Like, it wasn't Caleb Williams holding on to the ball too long. It was him holding on to it as long as he needed to, and also, not taking any sacks, sliding when he did have a really nice scramble there. The flick to DeAndre Swift on the screen pass was gorgeous as well. I mean, those are the flashes of all the things we've been wanting to see from Caleb Williams, and he absolutely delivered in this preseason game. Still just one preseason game, still just 7 pass attempts, right? We're not here to say that means he's going to win the MVP and take the Chicago Bears to the Super Bowl. That would be a little bit hyperbolic for one preseason game, but it's everything we wanted, and it's checking off all the boxes from Caleb Williams that you would want to see in the first preseason game against the Bills, and it's a sign of good progress and a lot to be able to build on from here. I came away also pretty darn impressed with this Bears offensive line. A little bit of a makeshift lineup, missing a couple guys that would have been starters if healthy, but still thought they held up pretty well in the passing game, a little less so in the running game. So we'll take a look at how that group is doing protecting Caleb Williams, and also this Bears defensive line, particularly the backups being quite disruptive as well. So we'll turn our attention to the trenches next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right candidates for your team faster and for free. I'm on LinkedIn. I bet you're on LinkedIn. If you're not, that's okay, because a lot of your friends, family members, and coworkers are all part of LinkedIn. And that's why LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but hey, they might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn Jobs. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It was a big job in front of this Chicago Bears offensive line to not only just keep Caleb Williams clean in general, but also avoid him getting hit or hurt in this preseason game. And with your second choice at center and probably your second or third choice at right guard in this game, you could go in maybe with a little bit of hesitation or concern of like, how are they going to do up there with, Ryan Bates and Nate Davis both missed this game. So Coleman Shelton started at center, and then Matt Pryor started at right guard. And you could kind of tell watching it the first time through, like Caleb had pretty good time in the pocket. He got flushed out a few different times, but it wasn't like an instant flush, right? It's snap, drop back, looks left, looks right, hitch. Okay, now I got to go. But, you feel like he got the full 2.5, 3 seconds of in the pocket, go through your progressions. And if for whatever reason, somebody's not open or whatever, that's fine. But the offensive line, it felt like it on first watch that things went well. And then going back through in the All-22, I was particularly impressed with the pass protection for how this group held up. In particular, I wanted to focus in on the backups in there, or the non-preferred starters, maybe we should call them, Coleman, Shelton, and Matt Pryor. And I thought they had particularly clean games that, at least certainly in the pass blocking department, you didn't see any of those guys give up sacks or hits or really any hurries from either of those two interior guys. Absolute clean sheets. There was one time on the play where Caleb Williams scrambled up the middle and gained 25 yards or whatever. There was a stunt across the middle where a guy came from the left and across the right, and Matt Pryor, the right guard, was like a tiny bit late picking him up, but that wasn't necessarily like a pressure. Like he was able to finish the block. It just got near Caleb Williams enough where he saw the lane to open up and scramble, and I think he could have stayed in the pocket if he had wanted to, but he made the smart decision by moving forward. So it wasn't even that the right guard got beat there. It was just, they were tested in a lot of these ways and were still able to recover and pick back up and hold things down. Like, if anything, some of the pressure on Caleb Williams actually came against the offensive tackles. Darnell Wright got beaten and had to have that holding penalty on that one play. And then I think Braxton Jones had a couple plays where maybe he got pushed in a little bit, but held up pretty well for the most part. So as good as you could have hoped from that group on the offensive line, that again, not the ideal combination there, but it's been good for the Bears to get different guys involved in that group. We would have expected to see Ryan Bates start at right guard, but instead it's Matt Pryor, who has started games at guard and tackle in the NFL before, but it's more of a backup, preferably on most teams. But again, like I thought it was really clean, and I was like, okay, maybe you could have some trust that if they need to start Matt Pryor during regular season games or throw him in due to an injury for whatever reason, he can hold up in the passing game. And then, Coleman Shelton, I thought the snaps were pretty good, and the pass protection was really solid there. Like, there was not this pressure coming up the middle from him either. I think we know what we can trust with Tevin Jenkins, and we kind of know what Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright are as young tackles at this stage of their careers that are going to make some mistakes, but generally get the job done when you need them to. I thought the exception here was in the running game, which is a little bit less important for obvious reasons when it comes to, Caleb Williams, but still obviously going to be important as well. And that was where, I thought Coleman Shelton struggled quite a bit, especially versus some of the stronger nose tackles on the Buffalo Bills, even trying to get them moving horizontally on some of those toss plays. He was having trouble getting around that. Matt Pryor got sort of over his skis a little bit a couple of times in the running game and got beat too. It wasn't like they were terrible, but just, okay, because they were so clean in pass protection, I was like, wow, these guys are doing great. Let's see how they're doing in the running game. It's like, okay, that's not quite as smooth. Braxton Jones struggled in the running game as well. Like, as a whole, this O-line, they did well enough. I mean, DeAndre Swift ran well, Herbert ran well, even Velus Jones had a couple of decent runs, later on in the game. The running game worked, but it wasn't always stellar run blocking. Although there were a couple plays that were executed very nicely. Good to see the fullback Kari Blasingame involved in that a little bit as well. He played some tight end too, so he's carving out a little role in this offense that doesn't normally have fullbacks in there. But I thought comparatively then, you move to that second team offensive line with Larry Borum and Jatari Carter and Jerome Carvin at center, Bill Murray at right guard, and Jake Curhan at right tackle. And for Tyson Bagent, the pass protection was a lot messier, right? He got moved off his spot a lot. And I thought his ability to manipulate the pocket I was really impressed with Tyson Bagent's pocket presence. And I remember that from last year too, but like just reaffirmed it again. Like as a backup quarterback, Bagent has an impressive level of like that sixth sense for where pressure is coming and how he can get around it and still find a way to get rid of the ball and still almost make a couple of really, really impressive completions on. I think they ended up overturning the one on the sideline, but still, like I continue to gain more confidence in Tyson Bagent as the backup quarterback thing. Like this is somebody like he's a player. That's a real player. Maybe not like a starting caliber player, but like one of those guys that you look around the NFL, like a Gardner Minshew, where it's like no team wants to go with him as your plan A starter. But if he has to go in the game, you feel pretty good about what he's been able to do there, despite the backup offensive line struggling quite a bit in pass protection. And some of that was Larry Borum, and some of that was, that was kind of across the board. Quite a few different guys had a few issues here and there picking everything up there. I thought Carter was probably the best of that group, and from there, it kind of, Jerome Carvin was just kind of okay, I thought, and Larry Borum got beat for a couple times here and there, but for the most part, it was a little bit messier with that second team offensive line. On the flip side, though, the Bears' second team defensive line was also making it messy for the Bills and Mitch Trubisky. They got a lot of pressure on Trubisky. Austin Booker had another really strong game there as well, and then defensive line. Dominique Robinson, I was impressed with. He flashed a couple times, made a couple plays in the running game as well. I thought Robinson was really disappointing in the Hall of Fame game, but big bounce back for him against the Bills. I thought that was particularly impressive from him. Daniel Hardy was really disruptive as well. Like there were a lot of those plays where the pocket is collapsing around Trubisky, and then their third string quarterback, is it Buechele, I think, is the other quarterback in Buffalo. Like the Bears were making that offense uncomfortable with that second team defensive line, and you want to see them dominate against backups so that if they have to come in and rotate with the starters, that they can be more at a starting caliber level. Like starting caliber players should dominate backups, and we saw a few different Bears defensive linemen make some big plays against backup offensive linemen, and that's a good sign of the ascension of some of these rotational guys, and maybe a part of why the Bears haven't signed someone like Yannick Ngakoue in free agency, if they continue to be impressed by the guys they have on the roster who are younger and unproven and still have more to prove, but at least, much like Caleb Williams, showing you what you need to be seeing from them to know that they're on the right track, but still have a long way to go before everyone is really locked in and saying, yep, this is all set and we're going to take off from here. A few other guys had some up and down performances, and I want to go through some of the guys who weren't out there as well, some of the guys who got extra playing time with the first team, which means, hey, they may be moving up the depth chart a little bit. Some other guys that maybe didn't take as good of advantage of the opportunities that they had. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. So whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. The preseason is always a glimpse into how this Bears front office and coaching staff are viewing the players on the bubble. The guys who we're not sure if they're going to make the 53-man roster, and depending on how they perform in this game, how much opportunity they get in these games, and whether it's with the starters or the backups or whoever, like it's usually a pretty good sign of how things are going. It's only the second preseason game for the Bears, really like the first true week of the preseason. A lot of ball game left is what I'm trying to say here for any of these guys to improve their stock or hurt their stock. But I thought there were a few things in particular stood out to me. One, we didn't see any Colin Johnson, the hero of the Hall of Fame game, the wide receiver who Hard Knocks seemed to be focusing on at the end of the first episode of Hard Knocks. And we were kind of wondering, all right, episode 2, can he come out and what's his encore going to be? But doesn't play at all. And I would assume that has to be injury-based at this point. I don't think 3 catches and 2 touchdowns in the Hall of Fame game would be something where it's like, oh, the Bears are trying to hide him or stash him from other teams. That is not the case. I mean, that's just not how that works. But plenty of other wide receivers played plenty of snaps in this game, and Colin Johnson didn't get any. That tells me he was not available to get snaps because of injury or whatever. Same thing was true for Roschon Johnson, Ryan Bates, Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, Jake Martin, Byron Cowart. I mean, Montez Sweat is the only one who didn't play that I wouldn't necessarily assume injury. We haven't heard much about him. I think he would be the veteran that they would just sit down. But Jalen Johnson played and Keenan Allen played. So it's possible then that all of those absences were purely injury-based and not a veteran day off for Montez Sweat. So they're not trying to push anybody to be out there. If there's any sort of 1% of anything bugging or nagging them, don't play them, especially those veterans, in the preseason game. Colin Johnson, on the other hand, is more on that level of like, if he's borderline, you'd think he should go because he's fighting for a job. And, as long as there's not like a legitimate, like strong re-injury risk or something, like if he's dealing with some pain or something, some tightness, maybe he'd try and play through it to try and, save his job or create a job for himself, but instead doesn't get out there. So I'm curious how Hard Knocks is going to handle that situation, or if they're going to have to pivot off of him and find another hero, for a training camp hero for us to follow throughout the process. We'll see how that goes. But given some of the absences that we saw, Mercedes Lewis, I'll put on that list as well. Like, for example, with no Roschon Johnson in the backfield, we saw Travis Homer get quite a bit of time with the starters, right? Obviously, Swift was the number 1 back, and Herbert got a lot of carries. But then Travis Homer was in there with Caleb Williams too, number 20 in that backfield, blocking, receiving. And I think he got a carry or 2. Didn't get much in terms of actual handoffs there, but definitely a little bit involved in the running game there, but more of a passing back and certainly on special teams a lot. But good to see him get some of those opportunities. Clearly, well ahead of Velus Jones, who we got to see the running back debut. Every single snap he played on offense was at running back. Did not play any wide receiver in this game. Played a bunch of special teams as well, but purely a running back on offense. And I thought, kind of as advertised, good speed, runs pretty hard. I mean, he had that one play where he got tripped up by the turf monster, but the touchdown run was pretty nice. Beat the guys to the corner. I mean, there was some you saw the good speed there, and you could see some of why he might translate decently at running back. But then he muffs the kickoff, and it's like, one step forward, 2 steps back, right? It's like, okay, maybe we're finding an offensive role for Velus Jones while he's doing some special teams, but like seemed to kind of like call off Tyler Scott. It was like Velus Jones was on, I guess, from his perspective, the right side of the kickoff, and Tyler Scott was on the left, and the kicker kicked it left, and Velus Jones ran over to the left and kind of waved off Tyler Scott and was like, I got it, but then tried to catch it like up above his head instead of like letting it fall into his arms, drops it, has to pick it up and try and salvage the play, but like, it's dumb stuff like that, where it's like, just catch the ball or let Tyler Scott catch it. It was over by him anyway. You guys are both back there as capable returners. Like, just like, that one's yours. I'm going to go block. But I get it. You want to get the ball and try and show off what you can do because you're feeling the pressure and you're fighting your roster spot, and all of a sudden you're reaching up and grasping at the ball and dropping it. But it's just like, man, it's year 3 and you're like 28 years old. Like, you're an older player for a third-year player. Like, you can't be making those kind of mistakes. Like the turf monster tripping him up, okay, like that can happen to anybody. It doesn't usually happen to the good players, but like, I don't know that's not necessarily like a concentration thing. Sometimes you just hit a bad part of the grass at the right angle and you go down. And he was smart enough to get up and try and get a couple yards out of it. Like, I'm not going to kill him for that one, but you got to catch them. We all know this is the big thing. We just need to see you catch them. We know that you're not going to get a touchdown every time you return the ball, but you can't muff. We got to know that you're not going to muff it. Like that's the one most important job, and he let it hit the ground. Same thing was true for Tyler Scott, who got a jet sweep from, I don't know if it was from Bajent or I think it might have been Brett Rippon at that point, fumbled, was able to fall on it and pick it up. And it was hard to tell exactly, is that quarterback versus wide receiver whose fault it is. It's the handoff exchange. Was the ball, it was so quick, it's hard to tell. I tend to lean wide receivers got to hold on to that play, but it was too hard to tell even with the replay going fast exactly whose fault it was. But you can't fumble the ball, Tyler Scott, especially because in this game, Tyler Scott was not the fourth wide receiver. When they had the starting offense out there with Caleb Williams, it was Allen and Moore and Adunze were 1, 2, 3 for sure. But Simba Webster got some snaps at wide receiver with the starting offense. And not just one, but I didn't count them, but it felt like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 across a couple of drives. He really felt like he would have been the next up, and he's a guy that maybe we have to move up the depth chart a little bit here. DeAndre Carter also was one of the first wide receivers on the field before Tyler Scott. Tyler Scott didn't play at all with the offense. They were giving other guys snaps ahead of Tyler Scott on this wide receiver depth chart. So it's not to say that Tyler Scott's going to miss the 53-man roster or anything, but he was already playing with just the backups behind some other receivers and then fumbled it as well. That fourth wide receiver spot is open, which sucks for Velus Jones being a running back now, but could Simba Webster be a sneaky spot on this 53-man roster? I mean, if Colin Johnson were healthy and out there, could he make a run here? I mean, I think DeAndre Carter's in that mix. Dante Pettis is in that mix. Freddie Swain could even still be in that mix a little bit there, although probably a little bit less so. But good, strange, interesting, and notable to see Simba Webster get starter reps before Tyler Scott at wide receiver. That one to me was one that I taken good note of. And then also wanted to mention Micah Baskerville with the pick 6. I mean, a linebacker who he got flagged for a defensive holding penalty in the last game, probably saved a touchdown with it, but then steps in front of a pass and takes it back to the house. Stuff like that goes a long way. We thought Baskerville had a shot at the 53-man roster last season as a backup linebacker. He's probably still linebacker 6 on this defensive depth chart, and then they're probably only going to keep 5 linebackers like they did last year. It's still going to be Edmonds, Edwards, Sanborn, Sewell. And then it's kind of Baskerville versus Amin Ogbongbemiya, who is, a four-phase special teams guy. So it's really going to be Baskerville versus Ogbongbemiya for a special teams role. And the pick 6 is great, but we already knew Baskerville could play a little bit on defense, right? It's about him getting special teams victories there and those battles kind of playing out on that side of the ball. So, I wanted to make sure that we did acknowledge a really nice defensive play, but when you're playing against the third string teams, it's not so much what you do in that spot. Torrey Taylor, I'll mention real quick too, had a couple of nice punts. The coffin corner angle directions, put him outside the numbers, inside the 15-yard line. Could have maybe used a little more hang time if we're going to nitpick there, but the direction and the location was really good there. One of them was able to be returned 10 or 15 yards because didn't have quite enough air under it for the return men or for the coverage team to get down there and really stop it, but put the ball exactly where you want it to go. I mean, I think Torrey Taylor is definitely showing us that he's got the goods as well throughout this process. So a little bit of special teams talk for you there with the return men, with Velus Jones, and now Torrey Taylor with the punting unit as well. Love to hear your thoughts on the Hall of Fame game, or on the Bills preseason game. Caleb Williams' debut, what you thought. Were you 100% impressed? Was there anything that left you with any question whatsoever? Are you full speed ahead? Let's go hype train. Get this thing rolling out of the station. You can tweet us at Locked On Bears or post in the Locked On Bears Facebook group. However you do it, just make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for your second listen, now that we're wrapping up Locked On Bears, you can hear me today on the Locked On NFL podcast with Kevin Ostreicher, breaking down Caleb Williams' rookie debut. I'm also a guest on Locked On Sports Today. So a lot of Lauren on Locked On. The Locked On Sports Today podcast, the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On NFL also streams 24/7 on YouTube if you want all of our local analysis on all 32 teams across the board. So plenty of Locked On podcasts for you to keep listening to. And then you can come on back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.